Joining us now is Christian Whiton, a former senior advisor with the State Department and a principal with D.C. International Advisory. Christian, thanks for joining us this morning. As we've just seen from Dominic DiNatale's report, there are still some concerns about the future of Libya in terms of how the rebel forces will govern themselves. Will they split along sectarian lines? What will happen there?
Well, Kelly, it's often said that an army prepares to fight the last war, and that's meant as a critique of calcified thought. And I think that unfortunately applies to the army of analysts in Washington who, in Libya, see only Iraq, post-war Iraq, Baghdad. But I think there is cause for optimism. You have a lot of positive factors if you look at the way the government ran itself during the war and now after the war, or in the final stages of the war. It's actually been inclusive of all of Libya's tribe. They have a 20-month process of standing up a new government, a new constitution, one that's ratified by the Libyan people, starting with elections in 8 months. So fairly coherent process, an inclusive process. But from Washington, you hear sort of the same talk of post-Iraq war days, talk of chemical weapons, of al-Qaeda, of sectarian violence and insurgency. There are definitely some storm clouds out there on the horizon, as you'd expect in any post-revolution situation. But there's also some cause for optimism, I think.
And a lot of what you say about the plan moving forward has been the result of the TNC, the Transitional National Council there, that's been working to look at the future of Libya. Based on their input and their involvement, as well as the international community, do you expect or anticipate a peaceful transition to democracy, or might there be some roadblocks ahead?
Well, as I say, there are some storm clouds. Some people, analysts have seized on a document they produced. It's not a constitution, but perhaps an antecedent to a constitution. It says Sharia is the law and that Islam is the religion of Libya. But I think it's important to keep that context. If you look at, almost any Middle Eastern country is going to produce something like that. But the question is whether they want an Iranian-style theocracy, one where elected leaders have to report to mullahs. And I don't think you see anything like that on the horizon. And there are two reasons. One, if you look at what the rebels say, they don't want a system like that. They want accountable government and democracy. And two, if you look at the way they ran Misrata and Benghazi during the war, those are the bigger population centers. It was commendable the way they ran them. They had law and order, but it wasn't brutal. It wasn't like the Taliban or the so-called virtue police in Iran. So again, it looks more positive.
So, Christian, what can the United States and the international community, i.e., NATO, what can they do to help these rebel forces form this new democracy that would, of course, be unlike a Western democracy, but certainly something that would bring some stability to Libya?
Well, through either NATO or perhaps better through the U.S. acting with the two big partners in the war, which are Qatar and the United Arab Emirates, we can establish linkages with the Libyan military and police forces. But what the Obama administration should do, unfortunately it's not doing, but what they should do is unfreeze the funds that Gaddafi stole and has in financial institutions in the U.S., some $30 billion or more. So far, the administration has only been able to unfreeze $1.5 billion, and they sought a permission slip from the United Nations to do it. It's another one of these instances where Washington is looking for an excuse to breathe life into the UN. We should just proceed and give them the money they need to run Libya.
Very understandable. Christian Whiton, as always, we appreciate your comments, especially on this important topic in terms of the future of Libya. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Kelly.
Jamie?